As Rangers fans, we know that a goaltender is the backbone of a hockey team. At Abundant Wealth Management, we are your financial backbone, offering financial planning, wealth management, tax planning, and estate planning services. To schedule your free consultation, head to www.abundant-wealth.com. That's www.abundant-wealth.com. Abundant Wealth Management. Live, plan, triumph.
You're listening to Rangers Radio, your home for end-to-end coverage of the New York Rangers. With your hosts, Brendan Azoff, Zach Domino, and Steve Pappas. Blue Shirts fans, the puck drops now.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Rangers Radio. It's me and Zook right now. Steven might be joining us in a little bit. I know he's working late due to the crazy winter weather that we're all experiencing, but especially up there in Rochester. And, you know, Zook, I see what you got on the screen right now. I know you've been the last couple of weeks, you've been the tank commander, you and Braden Schneider as co-commanders. So I'll let you kind of run with it in the beginning here before we dive into the road trip, the losing streak, and as the Rangers continue to fall down into the cellar of the NHL.
It's a beautiful time to be a fan of the New York Hockey Rangers. It's an interesting time in the Ranger fan space because there's so many people talking a certain way when we're halfway through. Like when we're in the middle of the standings, saying you either got to be really good or you're going to be really bad. You got to be really good or you're going to be really bad. When you actually turn really bad, you find out how many people meant that versus how many people were saying that, but really all they wanted to be was to be really good. They didn't actually want the other option. But it is what it is. Like when you said that, when anyone ever said that, you got to realize this team was never going to be really good. So The only option in the best case scenario was to be really bad. And we'll get into it, but boy, oh boy, is this team awful. This team, I don't remember the last time I watched a Rangers team that's this bad. Because sure, we have some names and we have some individual guys that at times can do things, albeit with Fox and Shesterkin that was basically almost cut in half when it comes to names. But the effort's not even there. And I want to take a moment just to talk about like the letter even further. Because what do you think's going to happen? Like these guys know they're not going to be Rangers very soon. So why the hell would they even care? Besides raising their own stock, which for these guys, they don't really care about that per se. If they're on the move, like they're going to be moved regardless. It's just a situation where the team wasn't good and they weren't trying before the GM came out and said that we're tearing this thing down. Now everyone, whether you're here, whether you're someone who you know you're going to be here or not, you know the purpose of this season is to go nowhere. So how can you even put effort in? Then it comes into individual pride where there wasn't much of it before the letter anyway. So it's the team's terrible. We're going to keep losing. Now it's a race to the standings, and that race is to the bottom, where I think we've eclipsed all Eastern teams. Correct me if I'm wrong in that race. Yep. And now it's just a few West Coast teams that we have to trump. But look, turn on some Penn State hockey and watch Gavin McKenna, who there's been a ton of articles written about earlier in the year, how he hasn't been great. He's severely turned it around, and he's been starting to play good hockey. Tynan Lawrence is playing hockey at some places that you can check out now. That's what this season's about. This season's about how can we turn guys into future assets that can't help us in the future themselves. That's the Vinny Trocheks. That's the Artemi Panarins, the Carson Soucies, the Braden Schneiders. And let's get excited about what we're going to get back. Because in all honesty, as Rangers fans, we've never done that. We've never had that. And what you got to look to is some teams that, look, it's taken 2 years, it's taken 3 years, but they had the plethora of draft picks and they turned them into a bunch of young guys that are now coming into the NHL. And look, the NHL at this point is either the prototypical superstar the Rangers don't have. We don't have the McKenna. We don't have the Draisaitl. We don't have the McDavid. Or the 20-year-old that's playing the style of hockey that the NHL is suited for, speed and skill, that's at the top of the points charts, and their teams are doing well. So let's get some of those young guys. And the only way to do it is to get high draft picks. And look, when people say that, the haters that are never going to be happy with anything are going to be like, look what the Rangers did with Lafreniere. Look what they did with Kakko. So what? It doesn't mean that's not the way. It means those two individual guys were screwed up. But just because we screwed up with those guys doesn't mean that that's not the path forward. And you got to keep shooting. You got to keep getting first-round picks, second-round picks, highly quote-unquote touted prospects, and pray that a certain percentage of them are going to be NHL caliber. And that's the focus of this year. And the nice thing about this team, and you say it more than anyone, is I don't think we're going to have a problem with that. This team stinks. We're going to keep losing.
Yeah, even a broken clock is right twice a day. So you have to continue to build through the draft. That's the only way, especially in today's NHL, right? I know the cap is going up, but there is still a hard salary cap. The Rangers are never going to have a problem attracting free agents. But the only way that you could actually get to the point of being Stanley Cup contenders and winning the Stanley Cup for the first time since '94 is building a core through the draft and then supplementing the pieces around it. And I think the Rangers are in a position where that's really the direction that they need to go. But we've talked about this at length now, so I'm not going to get into it about, who's the right guy to lead it as a jury. But you touched on it, right? They're officially last place in the Eastern Conference. They're 21, 25, and 6.
And by a decent margin, too, when you look at points away and points percentage. So, this is over.
Yeah, it's over. And they're 28th in the NHL overall. They're only a point ahead of the 29th to 31 ranked teams who all have 47 points. So that could flip. And I think all of them have a game in hand on them as well, besides St. Louis. Vancouver is only at 39 points. So they're pretty much a lock at this time for the worst finish. But again, this is the NHL. That doesn't guarantee the one overall pick. We've seen that last year with the Islanders jumping up.
If we finish worst, is there I'm more versed in the NBA lottery, and I know if you finish last, the worst you can pick is 5th. Is that similar in the NHL? If we finish with the worst record, I was seeing some things out there that the worst we can be is 5th or 6th.
Yeah, the number one overall pick, I believe, has an 18.5%. The worst team has an 18.5% chance of the one overall pick, but I don't think they could drop any lower than 3. I think that's how it works in the NHL.
So these are the teams, right? So right now, it's funny. We're not even worried about the Eastern Conference anymore. It's the Winnipeg Jets. It's the Calgary Flames. It's the St. Louis Blues. Let's jump those teams. And then we set our sights on the Vancouver Canucks. And it's just what is this saying about JT Miller? He went from the worst team. He got added to another team. And now potentially those two teams are going to be the two teams that are going after the first overall pick. But it's I don't know. It's a really interesting spot to be in. That it sucks when your main focus for a sports team is no longer to watch the games. What happens on the ice doesn't matter.
It really doesn't.
It's are we going to wake up and what are we going to get for Panarin? What are we going to get for Soucy? What are we going to get for Trocheck? Who I think that this show has probably been earliest on floating that name out. So if you look at a Cal Shear or a Poly Market, and they probably don't have those lines. When we were talking about Trocheck getting traded, it was probably in single digits. I think we're getting to that 50-50, maybe above 50% where this team is versus what they're going to get for him. It's going to be too good to pass up at this point.
I agree with you. And, there was an interesting tidbit that Elliot Friedman, who I think every hockey fan knows that name by now, obviously one of the premier insiders in the NHL, he talked about the minimum asking price for the New York Rangers right now in an Artemi Panarin trade is kind of a direct comparable to what the Islanders got for Brock Nelson. And if you remember that trade, the Islanders sent Brock Nelson to Colorado in exchange for Cal Ritchie, which is exactly, that kind of NHL-ready prospect, a first overall pick, and a conditional third. So if that's the minimum asking price, then you can kind of gather what teams might be willing to pay that. If the Rangers are able to get something comparable to that with a Cal Ritchie-esque player, a first, whether that's a 26 or 27 first, and a conditional third, I would be okay with that trade, especially for a rental.
100%.
So we'll see how that unfolds. And then obviously you mentioned Trocheck, right? We've talked about him at length. We talked about him before Johnny Lazarus came on. We talked about him with Johnny. And when you look at the, I want to say, lack of, second line or third line centers that could do all things on the ice, right? Because Vincent Trocheck, he's having a down year. I think everybody on the Rangers is this year. But when you look at what he does, right, he can play on the top power play unit. He could play on the second unit. He could play penalty kill. He's a great face-off man in the dots. He does all the little things that a contending team would be able to actually utilize. I can see a world where if they don't want to go after a first, they can get a top prospect for him, especially like I look at a team like Minnesota that only has a first and 27. They don't have a first this year, but are they willing to part with a Danila Yurov off their roster? Are they willing to part with a Charlie Stramel as a prospect and include a second round pick? Like those are trades that can happen. So I don't see any world in which Trocheck's name is not really getting hot around March 6th. It should be hot right now. But I don't know if you saw the the article that Vince Percogliano put out with The Athletic about what's gone wrong for the Rangers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like...
I mean, some of those things were glaring, man.
Yeah.
Like, in 2017.
But it's funny because we all kind of like knew it, and now it's just being said out loud, right?
Exactly. But, you know, when you read it back, you're like, we all thought this, but nothing was like actually written.
Yeah.
And we had no way of proving it. But he talked about in 2017 when the Rangers wanted to trade up in the draft. This is when Jeff Gorton was still the general manager for either Kel McCarr or Elias Pettersson, which obviously I think all Rangers fans would have been very content with having one of those guys on the team right now. That obviously didn't happen. They went 4th and 5th overall. The Rangers weren't slated to pick that high, but they were slated to pick, I believe it was 9th. And they wound up choosing Elias Anderson, even though they highly considered Nick Suzuki, Martin Necas, and Robert Thomas, all three of whom are head shoulders better than what they wound up picking in Elias Anderson. And then they followed that up with obviously Kravtsov the next year. So those were two duds in the first round in the top 10.
Elias Anderson was such a bad pick that because of what happened with Kakko and Lafreniere, those are the two that like we obviously harp on. But like Kakko and Lafreniere, the thing you can go back to is no matter what, those were the picks. Like the Rangers like had to develop those guys, but they couldn't pick anyone else. Elias Anderson's comps was like he's being topped out as like a line 3 cent, like do-it-all center, which obviously, and you know I'm as big as roster construction as anyone, you need those guys for Stanley Cup championships. You don't draft those guys top 10. Like you draft someone top 10 and his worst case scenario you hope is, okay, he slides to like your third line center with some offensive bump. You don't draft someone where that's your hope for him. And like everyone said that at the time. Like everyone was like his best case scenario was a mid, like if he ascended to the top of what he could be, it was like a bottom tier second line checking center if that's what you were building a second line, but most likely a third line center.
Yeah, it was called to reach when they drafted him. Like, I mean, we can go back to Lafreniere and Kakko picks in comparison. Look like they drafted Crosby and McDavid when you compare them to Elias Anderson. But that was called to reach. Kravtsov was called to reach. They reached a lot in those 2 years. When Drury took over, though, and this was kind of the stuff that stood out to me, was he added Sammy Blais, Patrick Nemeth, Barclay Goodrow, and Ryan Reeves to try and enhance the toughness of the roster. And you could kind of correlate those signings with sort of the downfall of where the Rangers kind of went wrong. That also, you know, corresponded with them trading Pavel Buchnevich, who they've never really been able to replace on the top line right wing. And then you talked about Kakko and Lafreniere, right? And those picks at the time, I think, were consensus. I don't fault them for taking those guys. And that wasn't Drury's picks, by the way. Those were all Jeff Gorton. But when you look at what really could have changed the dynamic of this team and potentially at least given him a cup over the last couple of years, is he refused Drury to include either one of those guys in an Eichel trade. And we all knew at the time that when they were talking to Eichel, it would probably take one of those two guys. And I think everybody was like, if you can get Eichel by including Kakko, you do it. Lafreniere at the time was a little bit more of an untouchable just because of his first overall status. Hindsight's 2020, obviously, but I think they're the only person that probably would have said no to including Kakko in that trade was the guy that made the decision in Drury. And that's really where you hurt, because if you had Eichel on that team, who knows how far they could have gone in the playoffs those years. And obviously we all know what happened. He got traded to Vegas and they won a cup. So clearly Vegas found out that Eichel was their missing piece and moved on it. The Rangers could have used Eichel as their missing piece and failed to do so. And it's just, it's all just, you know, detrimental to everything that's kind of unfolded. And now you see where they're at right now. Last place in the Eastern Conference, just 2 years after winning the President's Trophy and starting out like with a bang in the playoffs, going 7-0 and losing to the eventual Stanley Cup champions, and how quickly they've fallen off.
And it's a, I don't know what the word is, but it's like almost an homage to the fact that the league is all about needing superstars. Because if you look at some of these drafts individually, like look, in 2020 when we took Loff, is Loff Braden Schneider, Will Cooley, Dylan Garand, Brett Berard, and Matthew Rempe like a bad draft? Not really.
Overall, no. Yeah.
But it's like, because none of those guys became absolute like dogs, it just makes it look way worse. Like if Loft became a like Celebrini, then it's like, oh, you got that, you got Schneider, you got Cooley, you got Berard, you got Rempe. Even like a Kako draft, you got Matthew Robertson in the second round, Zach Jones in the third, Adam Ebstrom in the sixth. Sure, it's like they're able to find like they're able to take the low level guys and turn them into serviceable NHLers, which is a skill amongst itself. But it's the lesser of the important skills when it comes to that versus coming to the superstars. If we had the superstars, then it'd be a great skill to have, because we're constantly turning these late round picks into like decent NHL players. And maybe that's why for a minute, like we did have that run of Eastern Conference championships, because we were able to fill in the gaps. But eventually you got to hit on the young guys, because youth your top tier guys age out. The youth guys have to ascend to the top, and it's just not good enough. Like a Kravtsov, Keandre Miller, Niels Lundqvist, like it's like we just haven't been able to hit on the top guys. Elias Anderson, Philip Hedl, Morgan Barron. Like there's guys that have made the NHL, just no guys that have filled the spot of what you need to be top tier. And to go back to the Panarin thing, this is a name that I've seen circled a lot when people are just coming up with mocks and talking about the Brock Nelson deal, like to get a first round pick, a top tier prospect, and something else. More and more this week, I've seen an Avalanche first round pick and a guy like Gavin Brindley. You said Charlie Stramel as well. It's another name that has been circled, but these are names where recently we've seen tied to the Rangers, specifically because some of the colleges that they've gone to, the Michigans, the Wisconsins, the Boston University and Boston College. But I'd be happy if for Panarin we got the Brock Nelson return. There's like people on Twitter saying that Ranger fans won't be happy with what we're getting back for Panarin when we get that. I don't know what people expect more than like a Brock Nelson deal. He's a rental who, where he goes, A, he may not want to stay, or B, may literally not be able to re-sign him. So they're taking him as a rental. If you can get a top prospect and a first, and then like a throw in 3 or 4, which you take those, A, to draft those guys, or B, to parlay a third round pick into a future guy at the deadline in a future year, you take that, because then you're coming into this year with 3 first round picks plus a guy who anyone you get in a deal like that is going to immediately slot into the top 3 or 4 prospects for the Rangers, saying less about that prospect and more about where the Rangers prospect pool sits at this point. Then for Trocheck, like you're saying, you get a first or another top prospect. Then you start trading up the scraps, like Soucy for a third, Schneider for a third, and you slowly rebuild with a team that, you have some things in your arsenal to move forward with.
Yep. Yeah, see, like Colorado, it's interesting because we talk about the comparable being the Brock Nelson as per Elliott Friedman, right? And Brock Nelson obviously went to Colorado. Yep. So will they do it again? I definitely think they're in a position to do it again. And, if you asked me this 2 weeks ago, I was like, I don't know if they would be willing to give up, because they don't have a 26 first, right? Their first is now 27 because they gave 26 to the Islanders. But they've lost, I think it's like 6 of 9 now. They're going through a little bit of a rough patch here, and I think that their GM is going to be looking to enhance that team. And the beauty of the leverage here is that I think Artemi Panarin would waive to go to Colorado.
For sure.
Colorado can only fit Panarin if they send another player back. I don't know what Gavin Brindley's current contract is, but they only have projected around $736,000 in cap space. So the Rangers would have to retain 50%. So to retain,
he's making $875 this year,
exactly.
Which is like
so
a net effective $400,000 at that point.
So there would have to be another player, like a Sam Girard type contract that comes back, which the Rangers could utilize another mobile defenseman in Sam Girard. Now, the interesting part is because the Rangers would have to retain, there's a little bit more of a premium that has to be paid for that to go through. So I don't think that a Brock Nelson comparable wouldn't be plausible in that scenario. It's very easy to kind of, and I've seen some discourse on social media where it's like, you think Panarin, who doesn't kill penalties, blah blah blah, is going to get a first round pick? Like, no, you're going to take what you get. This is Artemi Panarin we're talking about. Like the dude, any team is going to go after him. Yeah, his playoff record is up and down over the course of the years, but you're talking about a guy that a point per game player on a really piss poor offensive team that could automatically get inserted into the top 6 on any contending team and make them even more lethal up front. Then you talk about Colorado, who already has Natchez and McKinnon on their top line. It's like, well, now you slot Panarin into a second line and see where that goes. So it'll be interesting to see. That's definitely a team that I have circled. I think Carolina will probably be interested. Florida would be interested. I don't know how that fits, though. There are several teams that I think he would waive to go to. San Jose is another one that has the cap space to make the move, has the prospects. Would he want to go out west? Like there are a lot of things that have to get sorted out over the next couple of weeks here before the deadline, but we'll see what happens, man. It's very tough, but to me, the biggest name and the biggest piece is Braden Schneider. Like we've talked about him. I know, on this show, we're not necessarily the biggest fans of his, but a 23, 24-year-old defenseman should probably be moved. Right? I don't see how he fits the future. You have Adam Fox as the one right D. If you acquire Sam Girard, say, you might have him as the second right D. There's really no need to have Braden Schneider, who really doesn't do much well on this team.
Well.
Like
you can honestly look at the best way to rate Braden Schneider is to look at the Gavrikov numbers. Obviously Fox is like of a different extreme, but like Gavrikov's numbers have been bad next to Schneider, and next to Fox they've been elite. So it's not even like he's just fallen off a little bit from Fox. He's gone to 2 different extremes, and it's a numbers thing. It's also just a watch the game thing. Braden Schneider is awful. With what you're kind of saying, the hope is that for some reason we see out there that some people have somewhat of a decent opinion of Schneider. So if that's the case, you definitely have to offload him because he is absolutely horrific. And like we're at the point right now where like there's no name. Like you name a name if someone's willing to give us something of somewhat value that obviously we're not getting fleeced, you have to pick up the phone. And more times than not, you're not just considering it, you're doing it. Like there's really no one that's off limits when you're a team in the spot that the Rangers are. And you brought up 3 teams, and it's interesting. I love Artemi Panarin. A lot of people will look back years down the line and will say maybe the best free agent signing in Rangers history, one of the better ones in the modern era of hockey for what it meant for a team like the Rangers. You tell me he's going to the Panthers. You tell me he's going to the Avalanche. You tell me he's going to the Hurricanes. Sure. Those teams are better with Panarin than not with Panarin. The fit is an interesting one when it comes to style of play that those teams are trying to play in Panarin and what he is today. Like, is he going to give you the crazy forecheck that the Hurricanes and the Panthers and physicality with the Panthers that those teams want in their top 6? I'm not sure. With the Avalanche, that speed and just that relentless pursuit of not going east-west, but going north-south, I don't know. And look, you hope that with a guy that's as good as that and he wants to win as badly as I know he wants to win, he just hops on a moving train and he gives you all that he can. But that doesn't mean he's necessarily going to seamlessly fit with teams like that. So the fit is interesting, and that's why you brought them up, and I've seen it more on Twitter. The Sharks is an interesting one for me. For a team that just wants to get those young guys some playoff experience, get those young guys superstar, get those young guys to go as far into the playoffs as they want, that's a name who I think people are potentially not considering as much as they can, plus the fact that they could take on the money, they have the prospects. The fit may be there. More so, it comes down to does he want to go there? That's another side of it.
Veteran scoring presence to kind of supplement what Celebrini and Will Smith have done there. Because really, when you look at the Sharks, and we just saw them up close on Friday, they have that top end talent and the young talent, but they don't have that veteran scoring presence that could help them and give them the next boost, the next level.
You see the difference in points between Celebrini and the rest of them? It's like 40 points at this point.
That's what I'm saying. So you add Panarin, that would be legit. And I want to correct something I said. Sam Girard is a left defenseman, but if you actually think about the Rangers, the way they're constructed, right, as much as I would like to move on from Will Borgen, I don't think that's going to be happening. So if you have Fox and Gavrikov and then Borgen and Sam Girard, you have a mobile defenseman and a stay-at-home defenseman on the top 2 pairs. that's a much better setup than what they have now,
It fits.
especially since you look at Carson Soucy's likely gone. Earl Vakanainen's likely not a part of this future. Maybe Matthew Robertson gets another 1-year deal to be the third pairing lefty, but that would be a much better defensive group than what they are currently rolling out. So
who gets more, Soucy or Schneider? Like, who do you get more for?
Oh, Schneider by a lot. Because
why do I
Soucy
keep
is
saying opposites? Like, I agree with you, but I keep saying we're going to get like a fourth for Schneider and third for Soucy.
I think people look at the player, and especially Rangers fans that are watching him up close have this bias to him. Soucy's an unrestricted free agent in his 30s. He's not mobile. He's not going to get much more than a 4th-round pick. Braden Schneider is a team controllable asset. He's young. He's still like he's a right D. He's a restricted free agent status for another year or two. You're going to get more for Braden Schneider. I don't think you're going to get a 1st-round pick for him, but you could probably get a 2nd-round pick or at least a prospect swap for that. So we'll see what winds up happening.
I mean, if we get a 2nd for Braden Schneider, I'm picking him up and I'm driving him to the airport. Like, that's a ridiculous fleecing.
It's funny because we started this year talking about, outside of the projections for the standings and all that, we talked about the Connor McDavid element, right? And how the Rangers are kind of trying to free up some cap space next year to go after McDavid. Ultimately, we know that didn't happen. McDavid signed a short-term deal with Edmonton for 2 years, but sneakily, I haven't even heard his name much because I think we're just numb to it at this point. He's got 90 points in 53 games this year, Connor McDavid.
It's incredible. I was looking. It's funny you brought that up because I'm looking at the stats thing right now. Just the 90 points is incredible. McKinnon's obviously amazing. Those two are kind of turning into like a league of their own. Back and forth. Who's going to lead the league in points? Because McKinnon's 3 down, but he's also got 4 games in hand. Just another thing about how bad the Rangers are. If you look at the top 20 point scorers, there's only 3 that have a negative plus-minus. And those other 2 besides Panarin are like -3. And then Panarin's -17. So like at what cost is he even getting those points? And I understand like it's a lot less of him and a lot more of what's going around with him. But like he has that many points and he's that much of a negative. Think about how much we're giving up. That means when he's on the ice, it's just like it's a really, really, really sad state of affairs for the New York Rangers right now. And we haven't even touched about on like JT Miller and like how much of a nightmare that contract is, how much of a nightmare that contract's going to become. Can you pull the C off someone once you give it to them if they're still on the team? You want to talk about fractured locker room, like what would that do? But I mean, it's getting embarrassing. Like playing bad is one thing. Your captain can't give no effort. Like your captain can't give no effort.
I have that jotted down too because I had a couple of people that texted me and said, "Did you see that defensive sequence?"
Yep.
I think it was the Sharks' 3rd goal.
He's getting on non-NHL social media, which you know how bad it is, how hard it is for NHL to get on like the Bleacher Reports, the ESPNs, like the not specific NHL social media. Like he's had 2 or 3 plays this year where he's getting on those, and that's when it gets bad.
And my response was the same to everybody. It was like, it's not anything new. I've seen this now for the entirety of the season whenever he's been in the lineup. And like the 3rd goal got highlighted just because he's just stationary at the blue line waving his stick around. But the 1st goal that they gave up on the power play to San Jose, Macklin Celebrini beat him backdoor. And we wound up tying up his stick, but he was too late getting there. So the pass was already, going to be directed in. It's bad plays. And then what bothers me the most is that the post-game pressers, he's saying the right things in terms of what you would want a leader to say, but it's never a personal accountability. It's always, we've done this or we need to do this better. It starts with you, man. Like if I had to highlight the biggest problem, it's been the effort from the guy wearing the C this year. Yeah. And that seems to be a continual issue that the Rangers have with who they name captains and then the effort they get from it. And yeah, I know that JT Miller in the grand scheme of things is not the biggest glaring issue on the Rangers this current season. But if you're a young player and you're somebody that's, going through the motions a little bit, and then you see your captain just dogging it at the blue line, it's not going to get anybody motivated to play. And you kind of brought it up earlier in this episode. What's motivating these guys that think they're on their way out? Well, it's not going to be the captain that's dogging it.
And this comment is like the exact person who can't be your captain. Correct. This is called a follower. This is literally the definition of a follower, and it perfectly encapsulates what JT Miller is. Like, there's certain guys that are like captain quality. There's certain guys that are followers, and maybe I'll give JT Miller even a little bit more respect, and I'll say there's a third category where there's like number 2 guys, like, and maybe he fits into there where if things going good, he may even be louder or more boisterous than the captain in the room. He's the guy that you want second in command, leading like the rest of the troops when things are going good. But he can't be first in command if this is who he is. Like when things get bad, he's a multiplier. It's like you got to be like an ace, like a Garrett Cole, right? A Tariq Skubal, a Garrett Crochet, that if your team has lost 4 straight games since the last time that guy started, you're getting 8 innings, shutout ball, 1 run ball, win or lose, whatever. He doesn't play offense as well. If your team scores runs, I don't know. But you're going to get a shutdown performance from that guy because that guy's your stopper. That's what the captain has to be, across all different sports. And obviously it shows itself differently in hockey because, you don't shut down the opposing team like a pitcher. But you give effort. You start a fight. You get physical. You don't lollygag and float around the ice and end up in no man's land. It's got to be when Mike Sullivan has a film study the day after a game. The one thing he can point to is JT Miller's effort. Like, we need guys playing like that. Yep. You got to burn his film. And you can't have that when you're a captain.
And you look at the first game of this 4-game trip against Philly, and he was hitting people, especially at the start of that second period. He had like 3 or 4 hits on his first shift, and they wound up winning that game pretty handily because there was an effort there. And then over the next 3 games in Cali, it just evaporated. So it's been a problem. But
even is more to that point, right? He can do it for the first 5 minutes, and we get a lead, and we play well, and he's able to stick with it. If he did that for the first 5 minutes, and we went down 2-0, the same shit would have happened. We would have been floating around the ice. So like, he's a fraud. He's fraud with that. Like, I'm happy you brought that up because that even shows it even more on the other side. Like when things are good, sure, anybody can keep it up when you're playing well, right? It's what if he started that way and we were playing well and we gave up a goal and we gave up 2 goals. We would have turtled like we have all season. And they need top end talent and they need leadership. And it's like they got to find both of those quick. And as we know with, what's going on this offseason, I don't know if you can find it. And that's why, if anything, it's so important just to get assets. And I'll keep going back to this. It's so sad because it's the exact opposite thing that Drury sold us on when he traded future assets and a young skill guy for JT Miller and some of the other guys that we got. Like, hey, we may give up some top end skill, but we're going to be dogs. And we're going to be a tough team. And we have no skill and we're the easiest team to play against in the league. So he accomplished neither of those.
Yeah, it's been a tough season. We have the Olympics in a couple of weeks now, which at least we could look forward to that, watching some high-quality hockey there. And then you also have
those are the funniest highlights. You see those, like it's like, oh, we watched JT Miller float around the ice where Jason Miller and Caulfield are just lighting it up.
Yeah,
and it's
exactly. It's terrible. And listen, it's like we have the Olympics coming up. We'll get to watch some good hockey there. Obviously, the highlight of the Rangers season is going to be March 6th at the trade deadline. We'll see exactly what unfolds, whether Drury's fully committed to retooling this team or if he's really just looking to parse away some of the UFAs. I know Nicole, who's in the comments, was on the show last week when we let some people on, and she mentioned that if you have to trade the guys that are not the obvious ones for us to be fully bought in, that you're actually considering retooling.
So who's the one then? And we can close on this because I just got a hard out. But say Trocheck is now, like, he may have used to fit into that, but I think Trocheck is the one where we think he's going to be traded at this point. Is there another name that would signal to you like, okay, he's actually doing a rebuild?
Yeah, I think it's Trocheck and Schneider. Okay. I think those are the 2 guys that you can move without, really having ramifications on your current roster, as well as potentially getting something in a return for them. I mean, you look up and down the lineup, there are a ton of guys that I would move. I mean, if Meek is willing to waive this year, I think he's really turned around his stock and trade value. So that would be somebody you can get something for. I don't know if that's really going to happen. I would move JT Miller, but we all know that's not going to happen. So I think you look at Panarin's the obvious one, Soucy's an obvious one, but Trocheck and Schneider are a little less obvious because of their contract. And those would be the guys that I circle and say, if he moves them and gets something in return, okay, we're moving in the right direction.
You got to get rid of a Carrick also, you think, or Radish, if anyone wants like any of those
I think
pieces.
I think if you get calls on them and can get any type of draft capital, you do it at this point. They have to build draft capital, even if they don't utilize that in the draft, and they can move that draft capital for other prospects or players in the future. That's what you're building towards this year. Because
Is there anyone that you're hanging up the phone for? Or is there anybody at this point that has like if someone says Igor and Fox and gives you like a Godfather offer, you're taking that at this point?
I mean, I would consider it. I don't know if I would take it because it depends on how quickly they want to get back into contention. But because remember, he said retool, not rebuild. The only player that I think I'm right now hanging up the phone for is Perot, just because you haven't given him enough of a window to see what he actually has. And if you're really going younger and trying to build that way, you have to give him a chance. Outside of him, though, I think Fox and Shesterkin, it's got to be some massive deal to move them at this current point. Everybody else is kind of up for grabs. I mean, we said it last week. It's really Fox, Shesterkin, Gavrikov, and Perot are the untouchables right now. Everybody else is kind of in that realm of should they be traded? Probably, but we all know Miller, Zibanejad are probably going to be around. So we'll see what happens.
Would you move Laba?
I wouldn't move him unless somebody was willing to give you a really good offer, but I don't think they will because he doesn't have that track record. But that's the type of player that could be your 3C, has the speed. Like they've built this. You mentioned the fringe NHL players. Yeah, they have fringe NHL players that they've drafted late and gotten up there, but they all don't possess the speed that Laba does. And if you're going to have guys that are fifth-round picks, the one attribute you want them to have is speed. A lot of them don't have it. So we'll see what winds up happening. I think there's a lot that's going to unfold over the next month or two, especially since there's a NHL pause. Drury's going to be able to operate the phones pretty freely.
And Guerin will be with Trocheck in Italy. So hopefully those two guys get along, right?
Yep, and Drury will be there too. He's an AGM on that team. So
I just hope that
have some conversations. We'll see what happens, man.
It'll be like just give us something to be excited about. And it sucks that that's what it would be, but honestly, offloading guys and getting a war. Like I know my Jets friends, like did they want the season to turn out this way? No. But they traded all these guys and have like 4 first-round picks, a plethora of second-round picks over the next 2 years. It gives you a vision, right, of what the plan is. There's no vision right now until he actually goes through and trades these people. And because this isn't the second letter in so many years, we don't believe it until we see it, like you're saying, that just give us a vision of what like the goal is. And like we'll give you time if you trade a bunch of guys and we have a ton of first-round picks over the next 2 years. But, like, we're not going to give you any time if you built this team and gave away future assets for guys in their 30s. So just prove to us that you're actually willing to go through the rebuild. And, look, will we hate it when we lose next year? Sure. But is it easier to lose when, like, we have a bunch of guys in AHL or in college that we know are 2 or 3 years away? Yeah. So just present the vision to us. And as fans, we're obviously fans, so we're going to be emotional and overreact, but we also understand the game and can get behind something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we hope everybody stays warm and cozy on this crazy winter weather that we're having, and we'll be back next week on Thursday, hopefully, to chat about it, see what goes on over the next couple of games. But obviously, the conversation is going to remain pretty much the same, right? We're all looking forward to March 6th and the deadline and see exactly what unfolds with this New York Rangers team, as they are now 1 point away from being 31st overall.
Let's go. We're almost there. We're almost there.
Well,
stay warm,
everybody listening. Stay warm, and we'll see you next week.
Peace.